Sometimes it may happen that we've been watching Netflix or YouTube videos in the language that we're learning and we feel really confident and like we finally understand a lot. But then we take some structured class or some online grammar lesson and suddenly it seems like we don't know anything anymore. Why does that happen? In case we haven't met yet, I'm Alex. I've been passionate about learning languages for as long as I can remember. I'm also the founder of Linguamers, which is a language learning app based on my experience of having learned over a dozen languages. And today I would like to talk about progress and when we feel like we're making a step backwards. Whenever we are engaged with the language, watching something, reading a book in the language or speaking it, we are making progress. But what we need to differentiate is that progress is absolute, while the feeling of progress is relative. Whether we feel like we're making progress or not depends on what we're comparing it to. And we're usually comparing it to another situation where we felt more confident, where we felt like we understood more. But whether we were really more advanced or not is very difficult, because what we're comparing are usually feelings or impressions and not our real level of in our language, which is very difficult to quantify and therefore probably should not be compared. So it happens regularly that we've been recently watching a certain film or reading something in the language and our level of confidence increases, we feel better and better about it, but then we're in a different situation, we're talking to another person that we haven't talked to yet, or we decide to take some online class and we suddenly feel like we don't understand anything anymore and all our confidence is just shattered and gone. Why does that happen? When we spend a lot of time with a certain resource, we get very good at that resource. For example, if we spend a lot of time watching a certain YouTuber in our target language, we get used to how that YouTuber speaks. We get used to the words that that YouTuber uses and the topics that they talk about. But then when we talk to someone else, they may use different words, they may talk about a different topic, and that is why we suddenly feel like all our confidence is lost. But it doesn't mean that our level is lower, it doesn't mean that we've made a step backwards. We actually made a lot of steps forward with the YouTuber that we understood a lot, and now it just seems like we stepped back because relatively to that level we understand less, but our overall level is still the same and it is definitely higher than it was recently. So the situations in which we use the language affect a lot our perception of how much progress we have made, because in different situations we may feel more comfortable or less comfortable in using the language, and we may be more able or less able to understand what others say. Now, there is also the situation of taking an online class, of taking grammar lessons, where we suddenly feel like we don't know the grammar rules anymore. One big criticism of me there is that grammar lessons, they force you to think about the language. And this is a very big mistake that a lot of classes do, a lot of schools do. It is a way of approaching language learning that equates learning a language to learning physics or learning chemistry. And this is very wrong, because learning a language is a completely different thing. Learning a language is actually much more like learning how to walk. This may sound weird, but every child learns how to walk without thinking about it. You don't think about how you should move your legs when you walk or when you run. You just learned it, and there's no person in the world that hasn't learned how to walk unless they had some disability. And in the same way, there is no person in this world that hasn't learned how to speak. Every person learns how to speak their mother tongue. So it is not something that you have to think about. But learning physics, learning maths is a very different thing. That is something that you have to think about. That is not something that every child automatically learns. So it is really important to detach ourselves from this idea that we should think about the language. And it is difficult because throughout the whole school system, it gets ingrained in ourselves that we should think about the language, we should think about the grammar rules, and we need to unlearn this approach and trust ourselves that we speak the language and we learn it by absorbing it, by making it our own, by ingraining in ourselves the patterns of the language, and that leads us to speaking it. So one reason why we may feel like we don't know any grammar rules anymore in a classroom may really come from the fact that we're not used to thinking about the language. And that's a good thing. We shouldn't think about the language. We should continue watching content in the language. We should continue trying to speak the language and trusting ourselves that we can speak it fluently. That is really the key to making progress in the language we're learning. So these are two of the main factors of why we may sometimes feel that we've made a step back in our language learning journey. One is that we are in a new environment where the language is used in a different way. And the other is that we're probably thinking too much about the language, or also asked to think a lot about the language. And this is something that we have to unlearn, the thinking and trusting the language learning process more. And this is actually the beauty about learning languages. It's kind of like a spiritual journey. We're not only learning a language and learning about a new culture, but we're also learning about ourselves. We're learning to trust the progress more. We are learning to let go of controlling the process, of wanting to control the language learning journey, and to just trust that the progress comes with every interaction with the language. This is what makes me really love learning languages. I hope you found this video useful and interesting. If you haven't done so, like and subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.